This is Pressers by FedNet, where news conferences from the United States Congress become podcast episodes for your listening on your time. Senate Republicans, led by Majority Leader John Thune, held their news conference on February 4th to discuss legislative priorities and advancing President Trump's nominees. The following material is protected by copyright.
Good afternoon. I think, as everybody knows, the focus of the Senate right now is working through the President's nominations. We have made considerable headway there. After this week, we will be confirming the President's nominees at virtually twice the rate of 2021 and 2017. And that's really important for the foreseeable future, that we allow the President to get his people in place so they can begin to implement his agenda. So that will continue to be our focus here in the United States Senate. As we are doing that, this week we also have Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu visiting the Capitol. And as all of you know, he was here not that long ago. Israel is our closest ally in the Middle East. The last time that he was here, a number of Democrats, including Vice President Harris, boycotted his remarks in the House of Representatives. This time around, his visit follows a time when the Democrats here in the Senate basically, through their vote, gave legitimacy to an illegitimate court because they didn't want to defend Israel's right to defend itself or American citizens from the actions of the International Criminal Court, which is an illegitimate court. So the Republicans are here and ready when the Democrats decide it's time to actually work in the interest of and defending America's greatest ally in the Middle East, Israel. Republicans have been consistent in doing that for the last year through the war with Hamas. Democrats have not. But we are ready to go to work and ensure that our allies' interests all around the world are protected. And we hope at some point to have the Democrats join us in that effort. Senator Capito.
Thank you. Well, thank you all for being here. And, we know from the election in November that one of the biggest issues in front of the American people is what's been going on, particularly at our southern border. And I just wanted to highlight some of the victories that President Trump has already had in the very short time that he's been president. He declared a national border emergency. He has resumed construction of the border wall. He has deported, as we see, numbers of illegal immigrants, particularly those who have criminal records. And he has entered into negotiation with tariffs in Canada, in Mexico, which has resulted very successfully on both of those countries, our friends and our neighbors, enlisting in his cause and our cause to make our border safe, not just from illegal immigrants coming in, but also from the flow of fentanyl that's killing Americans at a rapid pace. We've also confirmed Kristi Noem as the Cabinet Secretary for the Department of Homeland Security, and we passed the Lake and Riley Act, which he signed just last week. So, what's been the result of this in just a short period of time? Illegal border crossings have dropped 60% in this short period of time. We also know that the Border Patrol recorded 582 illegal crossings at the southern border on a single day last week, whereas the single-day crossing number had peaked at 11,000 in a single day in December of 2023. I think you can see that the President's policies and our ability to back him up here in the Senate and the House has resulted in a real tightening of our border, a real shrinking of the numbers, and I think give the assurances to the American people that not only does he mean business, but he means results at the same time.
Senator Scott.
President Trump also had the agenda to stop the weaponization of government. And tomorrow in the banking hearing, we will have a hearing on debanking and how the Biden administration weaponized the regulatory environment to stop banking industries and individuals. And we'll have a serious conversation about that tomorrow.
Thank you. Questions?
Leader Thune, you, as you mentioned, you're almost double the pace where the Republican Senate was back in 2017 during Trump's first term in terms of confirming nominees. What's the difference between now and then? And has the President called you up to express his appreciation to you?
Well, we have conversations with the president on a regular basis, but I think part of it is just the understanding that we're going to keep grinding through these. And the Democrats, have tried, as you know, to delay the process, but I think it requires determination and persistence and a willingness to be here to do what's necessary to be done to get the president's nominees through. So we're going to continue that approach, and hopefully the Democrats will work with us. I don't anticipate that's going to be the case, but as you know, that's why we've been required to file cloture on a number of the nominees, and my guess is that'll continue to be the case, but they should understand that this is what we're going to do, and we're going to get these people in place, and we're going to do it as quickly and as efficiently as possible.
Senator, the Congressional Review Act allows you to repeal regulations passed by the previous administration. When are you going to start using the Congressional Review Act to repeal regulations, and what regulations are the first items on your agenda to repeal?
We have 10 or 15 potential CRAs that we're reviewing and looking at. Which one gets queued up first? It'll be a function, frankly, in many ways, of us working with the White House, determining what their priorities are, and with the House of Representatives. A lot of times those CRAs originate in the House and then come over here. But we'll see that there's a lot of consideration being given right now to which candidates are eligible for CRAs and how to prioritize them. But be assured that we will use our time, when we're not working on nominees, to do everything we can to repeal a lot of the heavy-handed, onerous, burdensome regulations of the Biden administration, which we think are strangling our economy and making it harder for businesses in this country to grow and create jobs.
Okay.
Do you believe that the White House has the authority to unilaterally close a federal agency such as USA without congressional review?
I don't think that, with my understanding, I don't think they're closing an agency, but I do think they have the right to review funding and how those decisions are made and what priorities are being funded. I think that's probably true of any administration when they come in. There are lots of programs authorized and funded through that agency, some of which I think are operating in the way in which they were intended and some which aren't. And I think that's the determination the administration is in the process of making and trying to determine, again, how the various programs that are authorized and funded under USAID, how those dollars are being spent, whether they're being spent wisely and well and consistent with the purpose for which they are intended. And I think, as you perhaps saw yesterday when Secretary Rubio responded to some questions around this subject, indicated that for a very long time Congress has been trying to get answers about USAID, those programs, how they're funded, why they're funded, what they're being used for, and have not been able to get that information. So it's in need of reform, it's in need of transparency and greater accountability, and I think that's what the administration is trying to achieve. One more. Yep.
With some House Republicans pushing for deeper spending cuts, whether it's reconciliation or government funding, is that something you can do realistically in the near future, whether it's with DOJ or through just Congress in general?
I think it's a combination of DOJ and Congress. I think there are things the administration can do, as you already have seen, through executive order. But there will be times in which, obviously Congress is going to have to go to work and work with the administration to find ways to spend less, to spend more effectively, more efficiently, and to ensure that the American people's tax dollars are being used wisely and well. And so I think, yes, we want to be a part of that process. We will, through budget reconciliation, looking for ways that we can scrub federal programs and find ways to spend money more efficiently and get us on a more sustainable fiscal track, which I think right now is, as you look at the deficits and the debt in the foreseeable future, that picture's not a good one. And so it's high time that we had this conversation. DOJ is a part of that, and I also think that Congress, particularly through the budget reconciliation process, will be a part of that as well. Thanks.
Minority Leader Chuck Schumer hosted House Democratic Leader Hakeem Jeffries in the Senate recording studio to introduce the Stop the Steal Act as one way to counter the so-called Department of Government efficiency.
Okay, good afternoon. First, I'd like to announce that all 47 Democrats will vote against Russell Vogt. We're united in our agreement that Russell Vogt is a dangerous and destructive choice to lead the Office of Management and Budget. And we saw a precursor to his leadership last week during the dangerous federal funding freeze that crippled, or nearly crippled, critical duties of the federal government and its operation. As the chief architect, chief cook, and bottle washer of Project 2025, it's Russell Vought who is laser focused on undermining our government. He's proven it. Senate Democrats will unanimously oppose him and do everything we can to prevent him from leading OMB. And should Republicans not see the light and shoulder shrug this dangerous person into this seat, they'll have to answer to the American people. Russell Vought wants to cast chaos across America. He's depending solely on Republicans to do it. And as I said, he's a danger to the budget. He's a danger to what people in America need. Now, on the reason we are here. So over the past few days, and Hakeem and I work together really closely and well, and I welcome him to the Senate as he welcomes me to the House, I think. Yeah, okay. Over the past few days, Democrats have warned the American people that DOGE is operating like a shadow government. Yesterday, I said that DOGE is not a real government agency. It has no authority to make spending decisions, to shut down programs, or ignore federal law. This is not debatable. This is an indisputable fact. No authority for spending decisions, to shut down programs, or ignore federal law. Yet Elon Musk took issue with that warning. He said, in answer to a tweet that I said that did this, he said, DOGE, quote, is the one shot the American people have to defeat bureaucracy and restore democracy. Now, give me a break. Nothing screams democracy like having a secret squad of company men pull off a hostile takeover of America's Social Security and tax information in the dead of night. That is not democracy, Mr. Musk. And yet it's precisely what DOGE is doing. It's letting a small group of unelected people, secret, run rampant through the executive branch, accessing the private data millions of Americans need, and God knows what they're going to do with it. God knows. So there are two dangers. One, people's privacy is at stake. Second, that there's a risk that this small group could cut program after program using one excuse or another. So today, Leader Jeffries and I are joining together to push legislation to prevent unlawful meddling in the Treasury Department's payment systems and protect Americans across the country. Our bill aims to do a few simple things. One, to deny access to special government employees that don't have to disclose their conflicts of interest or any other ethic agreements. Two, to deny access to anyone with conflicts of interest or lack of appropriate clearance. And three, include personal tax information into existing privacy protections. We call our legislation Stop the Steal. Whatever DOGE is doing, it's not democracy. We know what democracy's like. It's out in the open. It's not secret. You do two sides debate, and then the elected officials make decisions. Democracy doesn't work in the shadows. Democracy doesn't skirt the rule of law. And it doesn't give special privilege to the ideas and needs of a group of ultra-wealthy people at the expense of American families. Of course we should talk about reform. Reform's a worthy cause. Everyone agrees we should find ways to improve the effectiveness and efficiency of government. But you know what history shows? When it's done in the dark of night, it always leads to bad results. When these DOGE people decide to cut a program, have they even talked to the people who run the program? Have they even done a little research? Have they heard the other side? Or are they just in such rush to cut anything they can so that they can keep tax breaks and give deeper tax breaks to the wealthiest of Americans? Undoubtedly not. They are not checking They are not debating. They are not doing things in sunlight. So, we want reform. We'd like to cut waste, but do it in front of the American people. Hear the arguments. Have the back and forth that has been the hallmark of this republic for over 200 years. You don't have a small group of select people who have little experience across the breadth of government have access to these records and an ability to cut funding. The American people have a right to be part of the debate as to what programs should be cut. And just because a small group of people think they know better than the American people doesn't make it true. So, we are going to do everything we can to sound the alarm and fight with everything we've got to stop this horrible, horrible act by this Doge group with the, of course, the permission, acquiescence, encouragement of Donald Trump. Leader Jeffries.
Thank you, Leader Schumer. And before Leader Schumer was a man of the Senate, he was a man of the House. And so we always welcome you back over to the People's Chamber. Democrats.
You sound like Nancy.
Democrats are always ready, willing, and able to work with anyone to find the common ground necessary to solve problems on behalf of hardworking American taxpayers, particularly as it relates to driving down the high cost of living. We understand that America is too expensive. There are far too many hardworking American taxpayers struggling to live paycheck to paycheck. Housing costs are too high. Grocery costs are too high. Child care costs are too high. Insurance costs are too high. Utility costs are too high. America is too expensive. Democrats are committed to driving down the high cost of living for working class Americans, middle class Americans, and everyday Americans all across the land. Our Republican colleagues are not serious about lowering the high cost of living. They've done nothing, introduced not a single bill, not put forth a single policy proposal. They've done nothing as it relates to lowering the high cost of living. At the same time, they are raiding the government, attempting to steal taxpayer money. That's what the situation at the Treasury Department is all about. We will introduce the Stop the Steal Act in short order to prevent unlawful access with respect to the Department of Treasury's payment system connected to people who are trying to steal personal, sensitive, and confidential information related to Social Security recipients, Medicare recipients, taxpayers, businesses, non-for-profits, veterans, and everyday Americans. It's unacceptable, unconscionable, and un-American. Stop the Steal Act will prevent this unlawful access from taking place. It's unfortunate that many of our Republican colleagues are determined to stand up a shadow government of the billionaires, by the billionaires, and for the billionaires that will stick it to the American people. That's what's driving much of the behavior on the other side of the aisle. Because at the end of the day, my House Republican colleagues are determined to pass massive tax cuts for their billionaire donors and wealthy corporations and then stick working class Americans with the bill by doing things like ending Medicaid as we know it. We won't stand for it. We will push back against it. And because we're confident that the American people are on our side, we will stop it.
Questions on this subject? Yes.
Senator, Republicans have argued that this is not an effort to cut government quite yet, that this is just a review process, that they're looking at how the money is spent, and that they're trying to come up with a plan to make sure that it's spent correctly. Is your issue with the process here, or is your issue that Elon Musk is the one that's in charge of it?
Our issue is, of course, with the whole process, secret, behind closed doors, and you say they don't want to cut. Look, when we saw what they tried to freeze payments to just about everything, what they want to do. So our belief is there's a real danger, a terrible, terrible danger, and a looming danger that they will not only have access to Americans' privacy information, but that they will use that to cut programs left and
But how
right.
specifically are you concerned about Musk himself?
We're concerned that Musk is in charge of Doge, but we're concerned about how the whole process works. And ultimately, the buck falls with Donald Trump, the president. But we are concerned that a small number of people were concerned with the whole process, including Musk and including the others who were in it. Go ahead, Hakeem. Do you want to?
As Leader Schumer indicated, the problem lies with some individuals who have been put in charge of this raid on the government, including Elon Musk. But it also relates to the so-called special government employees who aren't required to adhere to the ethical laws and the disclosure requirements that were put in place by Congress in a bipartisan way for a reason, to make sure that people have the best interests of the American people at heart. And that clearly is not the case as it relates to this unlawful access to the Treasury payment system.
When it's something so important as to who the government helps, it should be done in a way that adheres to our democratic principles: openness, debate, discussion, and reflecting a broad group of people who have inputs into it, not just a very limited few meeting in secret. Yes?
What other recourse do Democrats have? Obviously, you guys are in the minority on both
Yeah.
sides of the Capitol. What can you guys be doing when this is money that you have appropriated to be spent, both in the federal freeze and in the international freeze?
We have 4 different ways of recourse. The first is just bringing this to light, making sure that the American people know what it is. We've had some success there already. When we brought the freeze of funds to the public, there was an outcry, and Trump had to back off. When we brought up the tariffs to the American people, there was an outcry, and Trump had to back off. I believe there'll be even a greater outcry, or as much an outcry as this. The second thing we have is litigation. There are various groups that are already going to court to sue because they believe that this is against the law. And we are working with them in terms of giving them information, telling them what we know, helping make their court case as strong as possible. The third is oversight. In the Senate, we're going to have some shadow hearings which discuss what this is, and we're asking whistleblowers across Treasury and other places, we're talking to some of them already, to come forward. And the final is legislation. On the appointments, they don't need Democrats. But on legislation, particularly the funding resolution, they do need us. And we will insist that there be certain changes that undo these bad things. Go ahead, you take the next one.
What they're targeting now is things that conservatives and Republicans have long targeted, I guess with the exception of the FBI in a sense. Do you think Republicans will ever bring a line in the sand? And if so, what might it be?
That's an open question. And in the House, where the Republicans have the smallest majority of any party since the Great Depression, when they're at full strength, at this moment, they're not at full strength and will shortly be 217 Republicans to 215 Democrats. That'll be the smallest majority since the 1800s. But even when they're at full strength, all we need is 3. 3 principled Republicans in the House, and a lot of the madness and extremism that has been unleashed on the American people can be halted, particularly as it relates to the upcoming spending agreement that we need to resolve in a bipartisan way on March 14th. All we need is 3 Republicans willing to draw a line in the sand. Now, the extreme MAGA Republicans have made clear they want to end Social Security as we know it, end Medicare as we know it, and end Medicaid as we know it. Last week, with the unlawful Office of Management and Budget order, they made their first move on Medicaid. The public rose up in response, and they backed down in less than 40 hours. But we will never back down in pointing out the types of things that the MAGA extremists and the far right are trying to do to hurt everyday Americans, the people that they claimed they were working hard to help.
They've laid out a plan, $2.5 trillion in cuts. This is something that was in Project 2025, where Russell Vogt was one of the chief architects. It's something that Doge had talked about. And the cuts will be deep. They can't do $2.5 trillion without cutting so many of the things the vast majority of Americans, Democrat and Republican, really care about. Yes.
Thank you, Senator Schumer. Have you reached out, or do you plan to reach out directly to the White House to request a meeting with the president and try to talk to him about your concerns about Elon Musk bypassing the Congress directly, and what your message to the president would be?
Well, our message to the president is it's exactly the opposite of what he's campaigned on. It's going to hurt voters across the board, people who voted for him, people who voted against him, people who didn't vote. And look, whenever he's ready to talk to us, we're ready to talk to him.
When it comes to procedurally all of this, one, I wonder, I mean, the speed with which Elon Musk seems to be moving through the bureaucratic infrastructure, introducing a bill, the various other avenues you're pursuing, are they fast enough to keep up with what he's seemingly trying to do? And when it comes to this language that you're introducing, is this going to be part of the negotiations when it comes to avoiding a government shutdown, that you're going to try to force Republicans to include this, or what's the avenue there?
Congress has the power of the purse, and when Congress allocates funding in the best interest of the American people, the Constitution requires that funding be spent by the President and the administration. The Constitution requires the President has a responsibility to take care that the laws are faithfully executed. Spending agreements passed through the appropriations process are law. And when those laws are violated, the Constitution is being violated, which is why there has been a flurry of righteous litigation that has been unleashed, and that will continue. It's an all-hands-on-deck effort. Leader Schumer made that clear. All-hands-on-deck effort.
There's
a legislative component to it. We saw that in the House in late December, when the incoming president demanded that we hand his administration a $4 or $5 trillion blank check by suspending the debt ceiling for 4 years. Really? That was rejected legislatively out of hand. The next day, the bill was defeated. There's a legislative component to it. There is a court component to it. The administration, through the president, issues an executive order to try to wipe out the citizenship clause of the 14th Amendment. A few days later, in response to litigation that was immediately brought, a federal district court judge appointed by Ronald Reagan declared it unconstitutional. There's a judicial component to it. And there's also a component to it that relates to bringing along the public as it relates to pushing back. And we saw that last week with respect to the illegal funding freeze that was reversed in less than 40 hours. And we saw it as it relates to the wide-ranging, out-of-control tariff scheme applied to our North American allies that would have driven up costs for everyday Americans. And so we are working on this and pushing back on all fronts.
And just finally, the roots of democracy are still deep. And when the public is really outraged by things, there is a response, as Hakeem mentioned, I mentioned before as well, on tariffs, on funding freeze. We believe the public is so energized by what they have seen on this Treasury action that there will be a similar strong pushback, and the president will feel that pushback and hopefully respond to it. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks for listening to this FedNet podcast, and be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. This program is copyrighted by Federal Network, Incorporated, and provided only for informational and educational purposes. Unauthorized reproduction, distribution, or use of this episode without expressed written permission from FedNet is prohibited. Remember that you can watch debates, news events, and committee hearings from the 119th Congress on our YouTube channel at FedNet TV.